As we've discussed previously, we live in a media-saturated world, and we rely on a variety of both old and new media for entertainment, information, and connection. And a lot of what the mass media does, still to this day, is persuasion as well. So in this chapter, we are going to be taking a look at mass media and its evolution over the decades, as well as looking at the functions and theories of mass media, before finally talking about the ethics involved with mass media and persuasion. And all of this information comes from Communication in the Real World, Chapter 15, Media, Technology, and Communication. So first, let's take a look at the technological advancements that have happened over the last few decades/centuries. So the very first form of mass media was print mass media. And this came from the evolution of the printing press, which led to the establishment of print as the first mass medium. Now, things developed rather quickly after the printing press was invented, and today we see print mass media in the form of books, newspapers, and magazines. Now, these forms of mass media are still really important today, even though their numbers are declining significantly. Books, for example, led to the rise of literacy and the availability of literature, religious texts, dictionaries, and other reference books allowed for people to learn things for themselves for the first time. Newspapers, on the other hand, were one of the first forms of a daily chronicle of our society, and it allowed for people of the time and for us today to learn about current events outside of our community and our country. And magazines were the first national mass medium, and oftentimes these magazines were devoted their content to really important social issues of the day and led to the rise of many popular movements such as the abolition movement to end slavery and the suffrage movement to get women's vote. From print mass media, we moved into sound mass media, first with the invention of the telegraph, which eventually led to broadcast radio as a form of mass media. Now, broadcast radio was a primary means of entertainment and information for many. Back in the day, the radio had stories as well as information on it, whereas now it's mostly just music and advertisements with some talk radio news media still happening. But again, the radio has kind of fallen out of fashion today with things like podcasts and digital streaming. So the radio isn't nearly as popular as it once was, but it still is an important form of sound mass media. From sound, we moved into the visual realm. And humans like to both watch and listen to something at the same time. And the most popular form of visual mass media was television, broadcast television to be specific. And way back in the day, well, not way back, probably in like the 1950s and 60s, there were really only three major networks: ABC, CBS, and NBC. And television stole a lot of its best ideas from radio, things like serialized dramas and that sort of thing. And in the 1980s or so, cable and satellite television started to take over the market and provided an increased amount of competition for the original broadcasters. And in 2012, 90% of US households with TVs subscribed to cable, satellite, or fiber optic television. Now, since then, cord cutting has become an increasing phenomenon, with a lot of people getting their television shows through the internet. Which brings us to the internet and digital media. This is the era that ranged from the 1990s until now, and the internet has resulted in a lot of these old media providers having to adapt to the changing times. Cable companies and telephone companies, for examples, have had to change over the times to become the largest providers of high-speed internet access. For example, when the telephone was in its nascent years, the Bell system was one of the largest telephone companies of the day. You might have heard of them locally as Pac Bell systems. And just a few years ago, maybe within the last decade or two, AT&T bought out Bell Systems to become one of the largest media conglomerates of the day. And so these old media providers have had to kind of adapt and use phone lines to provide internet access and things of that nature in order to hop on board with this digital media era that we are now living in. So as you can see, we have come a long way since print mass media, but print was really the important starting ground, and we likely wouldn't be where we are today if it hadn't been for print, sound, and visual mass media.